Hello, Michael Tracy here, TYT. Good evening, all. Wanted to draw your attention to a story which I found notable today. Obviously, today was a day suffused with hand-wringing over Russia, as usual. Um, People spent the entire day flipping out about that. Jeff Sessions ended up announcing that he would recuse himself from any investigations that the Department of Justice might oversee pertaining to Russia. So that was the big development of the day. But I think another thing that happened, which struck me as noteworthy, is Devin Nunes, who is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. He's a Republican of California. Was speaking to reporters, and one question that he was posed was whether whether he would encourage or demand the full intercepts of General Mike Flynn's phone conversations to the Russian embassy to be turned over to Congress. So presumably the full transcript of the conversation that Mike Flynn had with the Russian ambassador during the transition period, which eventually led to his ouster. Presumably those full transcripts are available. We haven't seen them. We've only seen excerpts that have been selectively leaked by unnamed intelligence officials to the media. But what this reporter wanted to ask is if those transcripts would be pursued for full release. And Nunes replied by invoking the specter of civil liberties violations if Congress could simply just demand the full intercepts of private citizens be turned over, at their discretion. And what happened was Nunes basically invoked the prospect that journalists who are in touch with the Russian embassy over the course of their normal news gathering responsibilities, they could have feasibly their transcripts and their phone calls turned over to Congress if this precedent were to be set. So, which is to say, if the precedent is set where Flynn's conversations can be turned over via subpoena or to Congress, then any citizen's transcripts could conceivably be turned over, including reporters who might be engaged in sensitive discussions with, say, the Russian embassy. So apparently there was a reporter who was watching this exchange, Eric Geller of Politico, who I find extremely annoying. I have to say, I don't know the guy personally, but he seems a little grating to me. But that's not the main issue here. The main issue is how he characterized Nunes' statement. So Nunes was basically saying that, if we capitulated to what you are demanding here, that could potentially lead to the infringement of civil liberties or the curtailment of freedom of the press. And yet Geller characterized it by saying that Nunes had, quote, threatened to investigate reporters who talked to the Russian embassy. Now, that's just the diametric opposite of what Nunes plainly intended to convey in his statement. And, but, Geller's tweet ended up going massively viral. It was tweeted and retweeted and quote tweeted by a lot of top Twitter personalities. And that became the dominant interpretation of what Nunes had said, but it was just plainly wrong. And media did a good job laying out precisely why this interpretation was wrong. And Geller seems to stand by his just incredibly flawed summarization of what Nunes had said. So I linked to that media piece in the description box. So go read that for yourself. But the point is that by obviously portraying this tweet in the most incendiary possible fashion, with the aim of making it look like the GOP is somehow hell-bent on punishing anybody who tries to investigate Trump's purported Russia ties. Geller just propagated an outright falsehood. And this is a Politico reporter. This is one of the top people to go to if you're looking for, quote unquote, cybersecurity news. And he just propagated a blatant falsehood. And Nunes ended up responding to this tweet with a tweet of his own, and he called it fake news. Okay, so it's not fake news in the sense that it was just made up out of whole cloth, or it was just an outright fabrication. It was just a wrong characterization by Geller. But nevertheless, Geller gives ammunition to politicians, namely GOP politicians, who want to further this narrative that you can't trust the media, that they're all about putting out fake news, and that they're being just unfairly treated by journalists who ought to be seen as the opposition, quote unquote. So lazy reporting and this kind of just knee-jerk, reflexive mischaracterization that you see from a lot of prominent journalists isn't just bad in its own right, which it is, because it propagates falsehood. It makes people believe wrong information about what happened. But it vindicates this narrative that Republicans and Trump especially often try to hammer home, that being that there's this fake news frenzy on the part of the media who just want to take down Trump. Unfortunately, there's a kernel of truth to that critique from Trump, and Geller perfectly exemplified that today. So that's unfortunate. And I complained directly to him myself for doing this, because it's just unbelievable that he hasn't retracted it or even quote walked it back at all. And of course, he got picked up by Raw Story, by Talking Points Memo, by tons of prominent people on Twitter. And it really was, not fake news in the traditional sense, but fake news in the sense of being a flagrantly false interpretation of what was otherwise a pretty reasonable statement by Nunes. And this annoys me personally, because I'm kind of sick of it at this point of being in a position where I have to defend people who I otherwise dislike strongly. So I don't have any brief for Devin Nunes. I don't have any brief for Jeff Sessions or Mike Flynn or any of these people who have been the subject of very overwrought and inaccurate coverage. But for the sake of fairness and impartiality, you have to point out when the media gets ahead of itself and propagates these false narratives. Otherwise, people aren't going to believe you when there is some genuine wrongdoing, and then you point it out, because the track record is so blemished. So that's a constant annoyance for me, and I'm going to continue pointing it out where necessary. So that's about it for now. All the relevant links, again, are in the description box. So let me know what you think, and have a great night.